All right, guys, let's talk about inflation. So we just got some new inflation numbers, and it ain't good. So this is from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and it's for May 2022. Here's how bad the inflation is. Gasoline, 48.7%. Airfare, 37.8%. Transportation, what does that say? 19.4%. Hotel rooms, 19.3%. Household energy, 19.1%. Used vehicles, 16.1%. Furniture, 12.7%. New vehicles, 12.6%. Food at home, 11.9%. Overall inflation has gone up 8.6%, which is the most in 40 years. Pets and pet products, 8.3%. Food at restaurants, 7.4%. Housing, 6.9%. Personal care, 5.9%. Rent, 5.2%. Clothing, 5.0%. Recreation, 4.5%. Alcohol, 4.0%. School books and supplies, 3.8%. Medical care, 3.7%. Education, 2.5%. College tuition, 2.1%. Prescription drugs, 1.9%. And then you have toys, didn't really go up, 0.6%. Rental care, down 0.3 percentage points. Rental cars, and hardware and services down 1.4%. So anyway, that's what we're looking at now. That is a bit of a disaster to say the least. So I just want to give everybody real quick a crash course on inflation. There's a good video here that I wanted to share with you, which gives you the overall landscape and the different ideas and arguments as to what exactly leads to inflation. So I'll play this video, then I'll tell you in this particular instance what is leading to most of the inflation. So here we go.
Know what inflation is generally speaking, many wonder why it's happening and how to prevent it from accelerating at the rate it currently is. There are certainly many events that are causing inflation to rise, such as the war in Ukraine and new and reoccurring lockdowns in places like China due to COVID-19. However, there are many other things that could be contributing to the recent 40-year high in the United States and acceleration of inflation around the globe. As inflation will likely get worse before it gets better, let's take a look at a few theories as to why this is happening and potential ways of how to fix it and slow the rate of inflation. Reason number 1, pandemic-caused shortages. It seems there's a general agreement that the effects of the pandemic are to blame for the recent rate of inflation. The economy has not been able to function normally due to disruptions in supply and several industries having to slow down or halt production. When you consider that the supply chain is global, including commodities, global shortages could certainly be attributed to inflation.
Yeah, I think that's important. I think the supply chain is one of the biggest issues here. And look, it's an argument for something I've been saying for over a decade now, which is we need to do more manufacturing here at home. If we did more of our own manufacturing, then this wouldn't be as big of an issue because you're not relying on other countries that are currently in lockdown or about to be in lockdown. That would make us much more self-reliant and self-sufficient. So, I mean, all the original ideas, the policies that were implemented, permanent normal trade relations with China, NAFTA, these things are coming back to bite us in the ass in a very real way. Globalization has downsides that nobody ever conceived of at the time because they didn't think of a global pandemic destroying supply chains.
On top of shortages of goods themselves, some experts say that the vulnerabilities in our infrastructure, such as clogged ports and deficiencies in the trucking industry, have made it difficult to transport goods around the market.
By the way, a lot of the truckers in this country were basically slaves. There were these schemes that they were brought into where it's like rent to own the truck, but a lot of people would be driving goods all around the country and like losing money or making less than minimum wage because really the trucking companies were basically tricking them, and it was sort of like an indentured servitude / wage slavery kind of deal. And so, people sort of stopped doing it because they were like, this is crazy, I'm not making any money. And so you need to totally retool the entire trucking industry, and that's another problem that we need to address. There was a great piece written on this. I forget where it was written, but Crystal sent me the link a while ago, and I thought it was fascinating.
Reason number 2 is due to the climbing oil prices, which translates to climbing gas prices, ultimately causing intense cost pressures that affect a wide range of industries. Even before the pandemic, energy and gas prices were on the rise, but experts say the situation with Russia is making things worse. Russia is the third largest oil producer after the US and Saudi Arabia, but it is the world's largest exporter of oil to global markets and the second largest crude oil exporter behind Saudi Arabia, especially in Europe. Russia's war on Ukraine and the resulting sanctions are also pushing up prices elsewhere on commodities such as wheat. Reason number 3, experts argue, is due to the 3 stimulus packages that were pumped into the economy.
Now notice he said experts argue on this point. correct. They argue it because the conservative ones are saying, oh, yeah, it's all the big spending of the government. Every expert I've talked to says it's not the big spending that has led to inflation.
I believe the issue is that the government put too much money into circulation, which has decreased the power of the dollar and driven...
Even if that were true, you could just tax the wealthy to decrease the money supply. So that would be a simple solution on that front. And of course, Biden's not doing that, and he's also gridlocked and obstructed from doing that.
Prices up. They say nothing on the scale of trillions was needed. It's also debated whether it was the rounds of stimulus checks that gave people more money in their bank accounts to spend, or whether the money handed to corporations.
That first COVID relief bill was almost all corporate welfare. I remember they gave billions to the airline industry, and then they turned around and laid people off anyway.
Accelerating job growth is to blame. Reason number 4 has some people blaming corporations for consolidation and price setting. They say that companies are using their power to set prices at whatever they like because of the lack of competition.
So monopolies and corporate greed.
They also say that companies are boosting inflation higher by using the problem as an excuse to increase prices so that they can make more profits.
So the media hysteria on inflation then allows them to turn around and say, what can I do? It's inflation. I got to raise the prices. But really, that's just padding the bottom line.
A study found that 2/3 of corporate profits are due to inflation increases, and at the end of the day, corporations do have the power to change prices and create inflation. Lastly, some economists are blaming the cycle of rising wages and rising prices as a self-perpetuating cycle.
Yeah, but also the wages are not keeping up with inflation, so people are actually losing ground even though they're getting pay increases. I know that's tough to wrap your mind around, but that's what's happening.
So now, what's the fix? Well, there doesn't seem to be an easy, straightforward answer. On a domestic level, the Federal Reserve has started to raise interest rates. The idea is that when the Fed raises rates, it makes it more expensive to borrow money, which means less spending and less demand. However, there's a concern that doing so could push the U.S. economy towards a recession.
Yeah, it definitely would lead to a recession and will lead to a recession. So I don't know how they're going to roll it out without exacerbating that.
Keep in mind things like rent prices, which with rising interest rates could make building housing more expensive and raise rent prices, making the inflation problem worse. Others believe that the government can do more to help with inflation. The White House and President Joe Biden have taken some measures to try to address inflation, such as rolling out a supply chain task force to address issues such as infrastructure at ports and shortages in essential products like semiconductors. As inflation increases, the federal government could look into raising taxes, cutting spending, better antitrust enforcement, taxes on corporate profits, and price controls. But this would require White House and bipartisan cooperation in Congress. Ultimately, these fixes for inflation are just going to take some time.
Yeah, and some of those things I think are good ideas. Some of those things are probably bad ideas. But I just want to remind you of this piece here from Matt Stoller in December of 2021. Corporate profits drive 60% of inflation increases. Higher prices aren't just a result of supply chain chaos or government spending. Inflation is being driven by the pricing power and higher profits of corporations, costing $2,126 per American. So he's big on, anti-monopoly politics, and, he thinks corporate profits are the main culprit here for the increase of in inflation. But look, it's going to have political implications for sure. By definition, it has economic implications. So it ain't good, man. Those high inflation numbers are not good, and there will be consequences. Ever since Adpocalypse, when YouTube defunded all independent news and politics overnight, we haven't trusted them. We know they can pull the rug out from underneath us at any time. If you enjoy this content, please consider tipping $1 or $2 per month on the Secular Talk Patreon. Link in the video description box below. Thanks for your support.